Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first story is titled, I Cost My Neighbors Over $100,000 Growing Up in Our Peaceful Little Suburban Neighborhood. I never thought I'd be the cause of such a significant loss for anyone. But alas, my story begins with my neighbors and their peculiar love for cars, and ends with a costly mistake that they'll never forget. For as long as I can remember, the Johnsons have lived next door to my family. They are a relatively wealthy family with a penchant for collecting cars. It's quite a sight to see their 9 vehicles parked all over the street. They always park at least 2 of those cars directly in front of my house, which has been a persistent annoyance for my family and me. According to the local regulations, cars can't be parked in the same spot for more than 48 hours. However, the Johnsons never seem to care about that rule. What's even more peculiar is that their large driveway, which can easily accommodate 4 cars, remains empty. They once told me that they think parked cars in driveways look tacky, and they prefer the unobstructed view of their manicured lawn. To me, it seemed like a strange preference, considering they barely used half of their 9 cars. In 2021, I noticed that they were building a second unit behind their main house. The construction was incredibly fast, taking just under a month to complete. This struck me as odd, as it usually takes 2-3 months for such projects, especially considering the lengthy city inspection process. Suspecting that something wasn't right, I decided to submit a ticket through the city's app, reporting a possible illegal residential building without permits. I didn't think much of it at the time and almost forgot about the incident until a year later when I witnessed my neighbors tearing down the second unit. Word quickly spread around our block that a city inspector had visited the Johnsons and ordered the demolition of the unpermitted building. Based on the materials and labor that went into the second unit, I estimate that my report cost them over $100,000. As I watched the demolition unfold, I felt a mix of emotions, guilt for causing such a significant loss to my neighbors, but also vindication for standing up against their blatant disregard for the rules. It wasn't long before the Johnsons found out that I was the one who had reported them. I could feel the tension between our families rise, and every encounter became a battle of icy glares and terse exchanges. One day, as I returned home from work, I found that all 4 of their cars were parked in front of my house, leaving no room for me to park. It was a clear message from the Johnsons. They were out for revenge. I knew I had to put an end to this feud before it escalated any further. Gathering my courage, I approached the Johnsons and offered a sincere apology for the financial loss they had suffered. To my surprise, they seemed to appreciate my honesty and were willing to discuss a truce. We agreed to be more considerate of each other's needs and to communicate more openly in the future. They promised to limit their car parking in front of our house and even offered to help with the landscaping of our yard as a gesture of goodwill. The feud may have cost my neighbors over $100,000, but in the end, it taught us all a valuable lesson about the importance of communication and respect for one another. The next story is titled, Smug Entitled Karen Tries to Steal My Home and Calls Cops on Us for Breaking into Her House. We evicted her. Growing up, my wife and I always dreamt of having a big family. It was the reason why we purchased a large house a few years ago. However, life had different plans, and we found out that I was infertile. The dream of having our own children seemed to be slipping away, and we were left with an empty big house. The silence in the house was deafening, and we decided it was time to fill it with some life. As an alternative, we started hosting friends and acquaintances who needed temporary shelter. This way, we were able to help others and have some company. We soon decided to rent out one of our 4 bedrooms to a more permanent tenant. My wife posted about the available room on the neighborhood's Facebook page, and we informed a few neighbors, hoping someone would be interested. A few days later, a young woman named Karen, who was 23 years old and had a seemingly charming personality, showed up at our door. She explained that she was working from home due to the pandemic and needed a quiet place because her parents were too noisy. Without giving it much thought, we agreed to let her stay, relieved that we had found someone. I showed Karen around the house, informed her about the house rules, and allowed her to choose her bedroom. She picked the most spacious room with the best lighting and the nicest bathroom. She mentioned that her job required her to be on video calls frequently, so the room suited her needs perfectly. Things started going downhill soon after she moved in. Karen would take food from our fridge without asking, and she would even drink from my cup. Her loud music would keep me awake at night, and she would throw parties with complete strangers in her room. Her entitlement and disrespect for our home was becoming unbearable. Months passed, and Karen's behavior never improved. She continued to be a nuisance, not paying rent for 4 months and constantly taking advantage of our hospitality. After discussing it with my wife, we decided it was time for Karen to go. Over breakfast one morning, we broke the news to Karen, asking her to leave our home. She became furious and threatened us, saying we would regret this decision. Moments later, the police arrived, summoned by Karen, who falsely accused us of breaking into her house. Fortunately, we were able to prove our ownership of the house, and the police told Karen to leave immediately. Karen packed her things and left, and we began the arduous process of cleaning and repairing the room she had damaged. After days of hard work, we were finally able to restore our home. A week later, as my wife and I were watching a movie in the living room, we heard a loud crash. A car had driven right into our living room, barely missing us. The driver was none other than Karen, intoxicated and seeking revenge. She slurred, "I told you that you're going to regret it." I was in shock and disbelief. I called the police, who arrived quickly and arrested Karen for driving under the influence, driving without a license, and endangering our lives. It was only after her arrest that we felt truly safe in our own home. The ordeal with Karen left a lasting impact on us, but we learned a valuable lesson about the importance of setting boundaries and protecting our home. The next story is titled, My Revenge on My Cheating Ex-Husband with the Help of His Own Mistake. It was a sunny afternoon when I received a call from my attorney. "We won!" he said with excitement in his voice. "Your ex-husband's company is filing for bankruptcy, and he's lost everything." I couldn't help but smile to myself. After what he had put me through, he deserved every bit of it. My ex-husband had cheated on me with his coworker, and after discovering the affair, I had filed for divorce. During the proceedings, he had made some grave mistakes that I had used to my advantage, one of which was his involvement in a major embezzlement scheme at his company. I had used that information to force him to pay me a substantial alimony and child support, which had caused him a lot of financial trouble. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted revenge for all the pain and heartache he had caused me. So I had come up with a plan with the help of my attorney. We had started an investigation and found out that his new girlfriend was a nurse at a local hospital, and they were having an affair. My attorney told me that we could report her to the State Board of Nursing and get her license suspended, and that's exactly what we did. We waited until the divorce was finalized, and I made sure to have a clause in the settlement that I wouldn't say anything negative about their relationship. But his attorney made the same mistake my ex-husband did. They didn't ask if I had already filed charges against her. When the Board of Nursing responded to my complaint, I told them that it would take a subpoena to get me to testify, and they were happy to oblige. They suspended her license, and she lost her job. My ex-husband was furious and tried to blame me for ruining their lives, but I didn't care. I had won. A few years later, I received an unexpected update from my attorney. He told me that my ex-husband had hit rock bottom and his girlfriend had left him. He had nothing left, and it was all because of his own mistakes. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Justice had been served, and I had come out on top. But it wasn't until a few years after that, when I received a letter from his ex-girlfriend, that I realized the extent of my revenge. She had sent me a copy of a hotel receipt from the night they had spent together, just like I had done with her. It was clear that she had been hurt by him just as much as I had, and my actions had inadvertently helped her in her own divorce proceedings. I couldn't help but smile to myself as I read the letter. My revenge had not only punished my ex-husband, but had helped another innocent victim. It was a satisfying feeling, knowing that justice had been served in the end. The next story is titled, Old Man Parks His Car in the Middle of the Road. Somehow, I'm at fault? It all started on a sunny Saturday morning. I had just gotten off the phone with my best friend, who had invited me to join her at the newly opened cafe down the street. The place was located in a strip mall, which was usually bustling with people on weekends. I was excited to try their famous cinnamon rolls and catch up with my friend. As I approached the strip mall, I noticed a long line of cars waiting to enter the parking lot. I joined the queue, patiently waiting for my turn to park. Finally, I managed to get in, and I was eager to find a spot and meet my friend. Driving through the parking lot, I noticed an old white man in the car in front of me suddenly stop right in the middle of the lane. He turned off his car, got out, and leisurely strolled towards the nearest store as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't believe my eyes. He had essentially parked his car in the middle of the lane, blocking anyone from passing through. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. The narrow gap between his car and the other parked vehicles seemed too risky to squeeze through. After a moment, I decided to honk lightly, hoping to catch his attention. He turned around and I rolled down my window. "Excuse me, sir," I said as politely as I could. "That's not a parking space. I can't get around you." He raised his hand, motioning for me to pass through the tight space he had left. Clearly, he had done this before and saw no issue with his actions. I tried to reason with him, repeating that I couldn't get around and that he needed to move his car. The man refused to listen and began to get aggressive, stepping closer to my car and challenging me. Desperate to defuse the situation, I tried a different approach, one I had seen on the internet. "Sir, are you okay? Do you know where you are?" I asked, feigning concern. "Is there someone who's supposed to be helping you today?" His expression shifted from anger to confusion, but it didn't last long. He quickly returned to his aggressive demeanor, mocking my questions and asking if I needed help myself. I kept up my act, telling him that I'd call an ambulance and that everything would be okay. In the meantime, a parking space had opened up behind me, so I backed up and pretended to dial cops. The old man seemed to finally realize that he couldn't intimidate me, and he reluctantly returned to his car, muttering under his breath. He started the engine and drove away, disappearing into the maze of the parking lot. With my heart still pounding, I parked my car and met up with my friend. Over cinnamon rolls and coffee, I recounted the bizarre encounter, and we shared a laugh. As we left the cafe, I noticed the old man's car parked perfectly in a spot on the other side of the lot. I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. He had learned his lesson, at least for today. The next story is titled X Left Me for a Good Friend, so now I'm going to meet and work for their favorite artist. I was with my partner Sam for the better part of a decade. We had built a life together, and I couldn't imagine a future without them. It was during those early years that we met Alex, a charismatic and fun-loving friend who quickly became a close confidant to both of us. For a long time, our friendship was rock solid, and we were inseparable. Sam and I had always been passionate about music, and our love for it was a significant part of our relationship. We spent countless nights dancing and singing along to our favorite tunes, and as I grew older, I found my true calling in the music industry. My career as a videographer and photographer in the touring music world began to take off, and I was fortunate enough to work with some renowned artists. However, this meant I had to spend long hours away from home, which strained my relationship with Sam. As I worked harder to provide for us, I noticed Sam and Alex growing closer, their bond seemingly deepening by the day. The change in their dynamic made me increasingly uncomfortable, and I started to feel left out. They eventually confronted me about the idea of a polyamorous relationship, which I couldn't wrap my head around. When I refused, Sam chose Alex over me, shattering my heart in the process. The fallout was brutal. Sam tried to turn our mutual friends against me, causing deep emotional scars that I still struggle with. I learned that Sam had been using my hard-earned money to finance parties and treat Alex to expensive gifts, all the while publicly disparaging me on social media. My mental health took a nosedive, and I lost my business, my sanity, and nearly my will to live. During this dark period, I realized that living well was the best revenge I could have. I decided to focus on my own happiness and success, turning my pain into motivation. I remembered Sam and Alex's shared adoration for a famous DJ, whose music they bonded over and traveled to see. In fact, they had recently attended one of the DJ's concerts. This was the catalyst for my plan. Using my connections in the music industry, I reached out to the DJ's team, offering my services as a videographer, photographer, and social media manager. They were impressed with my work and offered me a well-paying position on the DJ's tour, which would give me the opportunity to travel, create content, and manage fan meetups. As I embark on this new journey, I can't help but think of Sam and Alex. They'll undoubtedly see my work all over the DJ's social media, and I'll be sure to post plenty of selfies to remind them of what they lost. Although my initial motivation was driven by spite, I now find myself genuinely excited to chase my dreams, reconnect with my creative side, and meet incredible new people along the way. The next story is titled, My Mother Thinks She's Entitled to One of My Properties. Growing up, my life at home was far from perfect. My parents were constantly arguing, and I often felt like I was caught in the crossfire. When I was 16, things took a turn for the worse, and I found myself involved in a legal battle that left me estranged from my family. I walked away from that courtroom, vowing never to speak to my mother again. 19 long years have passed since then. I've built a successful career for myself and invested wisely in real estate. Life was good, and I thought I had finally put the past behind me. That is, until one day, I received an unexpected email at work. The message was from my mother, whom I hadn't heard from since that fateful day in court. She had hired a private investigator to track me down, and she was now reaching out to me, demanding one of my properties as compensation for the past. She insisted that I owed her and my father an apology for what I had put them through all those years ago. They had suffered financially, she claimed, and one of my most expensive properties would be the perfect way to make amends. The audacity of her message left me reeling. I couldn't believe that after all this time, she still felt entitled to anything from me. Instead of giving in to her ridiculous demands, I contacted my lawyer and had him send her a formal letter of no contact, threatening a restraining order if she continued to harass me. But my mother was not one to back down easily. She sent a follow-up email, doubling down on her demands, and even suggesting that the property she desired could be the key to healing our fractured relationship. Her words, dripping with insincerity, only fueled my resolve. Determined to put an end to her harassment, I hatched a plan. I arranged a meeting, ostensibly to hand over the keys to the property she coveted. I knew she would be unable to resist the temptation of what she believed to be her rightful prize. The day of the meeting, I arrived early and hid in a discreet location nearby. As my mother approached the property, I watched from the shadows, my heart pounding in my chest. Just as she reached for the door, the police swooped in, arresting her for violating the no-contact order and attempted extortion. As she was led away in handcuffs, our eyes met for the first time in almost 2 decades. I could see the confusion and fury in her gaze, but instead of feeling satisfaction, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. My mother had finally received the consequences of her actions, and I could now move on with my life, free from her toxic influence. Update: it's been 6 months since that dramatic confrontation, and I've been granted a permanent restraining order against my mother. My father, whom I've reconnected with, has since apologized for his part in the past and expressed regret for not standing up to my mother sooner. Though we will never have the close relationship I once longed for, we have started the long journey of rebuilding our bond, taking it one step at a time. As for my mother, she is facing criminal charges and awaiting trial. The knowledge that she is finally being held accountable for her actions has brought me a sense of closure I never thought possible. The next story is titled Sorry, entitled Mom, Dad, and Younger Brother. I refuse to play Happy Family, and no contact means no contact. I, 26F, moved out in late December 2021, and for my emotional health, I cut off contact with my family. For context, I cut off my parents because they turned into religious fanatics and tried to push their beliefs onto me. The last straw was when they caused an emotional event where they tried to throw out some stuff that my late older brother left me to remember him by, anime graphic tees and a Polaroid photo album of the good times we had together. Their excuse was, "That is diabolical," or, "It's time to let the dead be dead." Mind you, this was their eldest son we are talking about, and they acted as if he was the worst person on earth. He wasn't. I even cut off my younger brother, 22M, because he became verbally and emotionally abusive. The only one I had contact with was my sister-in-law, 28F, for the sake of my nephew, and she begged me to get help because she saw that I looked affected. I took her advice and decided to attend therapy. In a few sessions, I noticed how toxic my family was and ignored all the red flags. Everything was going great until I got a WhatsApp notification from a group that my parents and younger brother created. They told me that 5 months of no contact were enough, and that I had a lot to do to reconcile with the family and try to keep the peace. I read the message many times and answered back by saying that, while I love them and there is no hate in my heart, I can't go back in contact with the people that damaged my emotional health for them to feel better about themselves. I am not willing to play Happy Family, and my emotional health is much more important than anything. Before any of them could reply, I got out of the group chat and blocked their numbers. My friends, family, my mom's co-workers, and my boyfriend, 28M, have said that I am brave for doing this, and I should always put myself first and not let anyone walk all over me. I guess it is good to finally feel free. The last story is titled The Fierce Competition for the Best Parking Spot. It was a busy weekday afternoon, and I had to run errands before picking up my daughter from school. I drove to the mall, hoping to find a parking spot near the entrance, but as I got closer, I realized that it was going to be tough. The parking lot was packed with cars, and people were circling around, looking for spaces like vultures. I was about to give up when I saw a small sedan backing out of a spot near the entrance. My heart leaped with joy, and I quickly signaled to the driver that I was taking the spot. She acknowledged my signal and drove away, leaving me to park. As I was about to back into the spot, another car zoomed in from the opposite direction and tried to claim the spot. I honked my horn, hoping to scare the other driver off, but they kept coming closer and closer. My heart started racing as I realized that this was going to be a fierce competition for the best parking spot. I rolled down my window and shouted at the other driver, telling them that I had signaled first and that the spot was mine. The other driver sneered and gave me the finger, then kept inching closer. I could see the anger in their eyes, and I knew that they were not going to back down. Just as I was about to give up, another car drove up from behind me and honked its horn. The driver got out and walked over to me, telling me that they had been waiting for this spot for over half an hour. I explained my situation, but the other driver just scoffed and called me a liar. I could feel my blood boiling as the three of us stood there, each refusing to give an inch. Suddenly, a security guard appeared out of nowhere and asked us what was going on. We explained the situation, and he told us that he would have to call the police if we couldn't resolve it peacefully. We all took a deep breath and decided to hold a vote. We asked people who were walking by to vote for who they thought deserved the spot, and after several minutes of intense campaigning, I won the vote by a narrow margin. As I pulled into the spot, I could feel the other driver's resentment burning into me, but I didn't care. I had won the competition fair and square. Update. A few weeks later, I received a call from the mall security office. They had reviewed the footage from the parking lot cameras and noticed that the other driver had keyed my car in retaliation for losing the vote. I was devastated. I had just spent a fortune on fixing my car, and now it had been damaged again. I filed a police report and pressed charges against the other driver, but the damage had already been done. After a long and drawn-out legal battle, the other driver was found guilty and forced to pay for the damages. But I was left with a lingering sense of bitterness and mistrust. I had never thought that a simple parking spot could cause so much trouble and heartache. From that day forward, I made a vow to always be vigilant and cautious in the parking lot, and to never underestimate the lengths that people would go to get the best spot. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.